Addresses have been identified as a fundamental geospatial dataset by the UN and a high-value dataset by the EU. Address data is used by tens of thousands of UK businesses, including for delivery services and navigation software. Crucially, address data can join together different property-related data like energy performance certificates or land registry records without using personal information, and this increases the value of other high-value public data. Addresses are no longer just about sending letters, they're crucial spatial data infrastructure used by tens of thousands of UK businesses. Reliable address data is important for navigation software like TomTom or Waze, and successful service provision like Amazon Deliveries. Control of the UK's addresses was sold to Royal Mail when it was privatised in 2013, and there is now a complex system for generating and managing UK addresses, where most of the work is done by local authorities, but most of the benefits flow to Royal Mail. There is now, if you are in the public sector, you can access address data for free because the government pays Royal Mail and Ordnance Survey millions of pounds per year for public sector access. But if you're a business, you have to pay for access, sign licensing agreements, and potentially hire lawyers. This is especially burdensome for startups and SMEs. My Lords, the previous government created a geospatial commission to unlock the value of geospatial data, but it has not yet evaluated the arrangements with Royal Mail. The process of creating and managing addresses is slow and complex with multiple bodies involved. Now, my Lords, this all causes a number of problems. It holds back growth and innovation. It holds back emerging technology. It hinders public service delivery. It causes problems for citizens, and increasingly it makes the UK an outlier amongst high-income countries. As a result, other high-income countries. As a result, our address data is expensive, hard to access, and unreliable. And all this, the government needs to act now to provide a data set of all UK addresses that is accurate and can be freely used by anyone offering services to UK citizens. This could be implemented by establishing a new body to manage address data or by mandating that Royal Mail makes the data openly available. Unlike opening up more sensitive data sets such as personal location, releasing address data, a list of the physical places recognised by the government carries few new legal or ethical risks. Many other countries are doing this, including those with a strong privacy regime. The harms created by the lack of access to address data are more pressing. And, my Lords, I offer the Netherlands as a very good example, which is where they've already been through this process, my Lords. I'm grateful for the support of the Noble Baroness Bennett for this particular amendment, alongside another noble lord, who no doubt will reveal themselves when I finally find my way through this number of amendments, my Lords, but in the meantime I beg to move.
My Lords, I rise with the advantage over the noble Lord Clement-Jones that I'm only going to speak to one amendment in this group. Therefore, I have the right page in front of me, so I can note that I rise to speak to Amendment 252, tabled by the noble Lord Clement-Jones and also signed, as well as by myself, by the noble Lord Watson of Wyre Forest and the noble Lord Maud of Horsham. Now, I want to apologise that I wasn't with the committee earlier today, but I was actually at what was curiously interrelated. I was chairing a meeting about the microbiome, and one of the issues that came up in that meeting was the issue about data and the management of data, and the great uncertainties that remain, for example, about if your microbiome, one element of your microbiome has been sampled and the data is put into a database, who owns the data about your microbiome? Actually, there is no legal framework at the moment to cover this at all. There is legal framework about your genome, but there is no framework about your microbiome at all. And I think that's a useful illustration of the fact of how fast this whole area is moving, how fast technology, science and society are changing, And I will actually say that I'm not going to blame the government for the fact that this is a gaping hole that's actually an international hole, and it's a demonstration of how we need to race to catch up as legislators, as regulators, to deal with the problem. Now, that relates to Amendment 252 in the sense that perhaps this is an issue that's just arisen over time kind of accidentally, but I want to really credit a number of campaigners, among them James O'Malley, who was the man who drew my attention to this issue, but also Peter Wells, Anil Powell-Smith and Hadley Beeman, people in society who've seen a really simple basic problem in the way that regulation is working and are reaching out to, I'm sure, many noble lords in this committee. And this is a great demonstration of how campaigning at least has gone part of the way to working, and I very much hope that, if not today, sometime soon, we can see this working. Because what we're talking about here, as the noble Lord Clement-Jones said, we're talking about the Postal Address File, which is held as a private piece of property by Royal Mail. Now, I think it's really important to stress that this is not people's private information. This is not who lives at what address. It's about where the address is. And as the noble Lord Clement-Jones set out, all kinds of companies are having to pay Royal Mail to have access to what this is basic information about society, basic information that is assembled by society for society. Now, the noble Lord mentioned Amazon having to pay for the file. I must admit I feel absolutely no sympathy there. The great parasite, I'm no fan of it. But it's an interesting contrast when we think of Amazon paying, but we also think of some new start-up, innovative company that wants to be able to access and reach people, deliver things to their home. And for them, the cost of acquiring this file could be absolutely prohibitive and stop them actually getting started, stop them competing against Amazon. And it's also something that I'm very interested in, the whole area of citizen science. And we're seeing huge developments of citizen science in areas that I often engage with, like birds and ecosystems, etc. But there's also a chance for citizens who have access to the data to use it in all kinds of interesting ways to help us all collectively as a society understand the social world that we live in, understand what's happening with that social world. This data is really crucial for people to be able to access that, and they absolutely should not have to pay to do that. One description of this is, and this is their self-description, so I'll use the term, it's a chance for civic-minded nerds to do all sorts of interesting things with the data. And I think it's worth just stressing that this amendment doesn't actually say how the government should do this. It's simply setting out the principle that the government should do this. So it doesn't leave open the, well, no, we should think this should be drafted somewhere else or approached some other way. It's simply saying, let's free the postal address file. So I very much hope we'll hear positive words and a positive direction from the noble Lord the Minister on Amendment 252.
The second amendment I wanted to speak to is Amendment 252 on the open address file. I won't bore you with my endless stories on the use of the address file during COVID, but I did live through, again, an experience of the challenges of this. And I'd just like to highlight an important phrase in this amendment. In 252 Part 1, the Secretary of State must regularly publish a list of UK addresses as open data to an approved data standard. One of the reasons that having this address data held by an independent private company is a problem is the quality of the data is not good enough as well. And that's a real problem if you're trying to deliver a national service. Whether that's in the public sector or the private sector, if the data quality isn't good enough, actually, that leaves us as a country substantially poorer. This is a fundamental asset for the country and the fundamental building block of our geolocation data, as the noble Lord Clement sets out. And anybody who has tried to build a service that delivers things to human beings in the physical world knows that errors in the database can cause really huge problems. That might not feel like a huge problem if it's your latest Amazon delivery, but if it's the urgent dispatch of an ambulance, it's life and death. And so maintaining the accuracy of the data and holding it close as a national asset, I think is a hugely important point, which is why I'd like to lend my support to this amendment.
With regard to 252, we have an open mind on this because there is a bit of a balance to be struck, I think, between privacy issues, but then the need to ensure that service delivery and commercial activity operate on a level playing field. So I listened to the Honourable Lord Clement-Jones' passionate argument, and I thought Baroness Harding made some powerful points on this. But I'd like quite obviously to listen to what the Minister's got to say on this, because we need to get this right as well. And I think we can't have a situation where one part of the public service is holding up or getting it wrong so far as public service delivery is concerned, and the operation of delivery services, physical delivery services, to our homes and households. So, my Lords, with that, I am content to let the Minister have his say, and hope that he gets all of our names right.
Finally, turning to Amendment 252, this amendment would place a legislative obligation on the Secretary of State to regularly publish address data maintained by local authorities under open terms, that is, accessible by anyone for any purpose for free. High-quality authoritative address data for the UK is used currently by over 50,000 public and private sector organisations, which I think demonstrates that current licensing arrangements are not prohibitive. This data is already accessible for a reasonable fee from local authorities and Royal Mail, with prices starting at £1.68 per address or £95 for national coverage. I think
anyway, 50,000 organisations accessing, but perhaps I don't know if the government has any data, and I'm not asking for it now, but maybe go away and have a look at this. We've heard that other countries have opened up this data. Are they actually seeing an increase? Because, that's just a number. It doesn't tell us how many people are denied the access to the data.
No, indeed. We do have some numbers which I'll come to, but obviously very happy to share with all noble lords deeper analysis of that. There's also free access to this data for developers to innovate in the market. The government also makes this data available for free at the point of use to over 6,000 public sector organisations, as well as postcode, unique identifier and location data available under open terms. The government has explored opening address data previously in 2016. It became clear at that time that government would have to pay to make this data available openly or recreate it. This was previously attempted, and the resulting data set had, I'm afraid, critical quality issues. As such, it was determined at that time that the changes would result in significant additional cost to taxpayers and represent low value for money given the current widespread accessibility of the data. A correction I have to make. I'd said it was £1.68 per address. It is actually the even more reasonable 1.68 pence per address. For the reasons I've set out, I hope the noble lords will withdraw their amendments.
Coming back to the open address issue, and I'm very grateful for what the noble Baroness Bennett and indeed the noble Baroness Harding had to say on this subject. Baroness Bennett was absolutely right to credit the campaigners of PAF for their work on this, my lords. The government there are many different ways the government can do this. It's not, as she said, as no Baroness Bennett said, this is not predicating exactly how the government goes about it. So it is rather disappointing to hear what the Minister had to say, given that they extol the virtues of data and growth being linked, my lords. This is a very clear example of where growth and business is being held back, my lords, and it sounds as though the government doesn't want to take on the cost of making sure this data is freely available. That could be the bottom line of this, my lords. I'm sure they will keep up the pressure for a solution to be found in this area, and I very much hope that they will do that, my lords. In the meantime, I beg leave to withdraw Amendment 74.